All right, cool. Okay, here we go. In 3, 2, 1. Hey, everybody, what's going on? I'm DJ Sixsmith. You're watching Sit Down. Rebecca Hall is here with us. The Night House, a brand new movie coming out August 20th. Really nice to talk to you, Rebecca. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. So this movie is fresh on the brain, and I think it's one for folks that will stay on the brain for a long time because there is a lot going on in this film. It is thrilling, it is chilling, it is horrifying. There's a lot to talk about. So what was it like doing this one?
Yeah, it was pretty challenging one. I mean, it is predominantly the plot predominantly takes place around me in a house, which means that there was, was more solitary than I've experienced in previous jobs, and there was a lot of, physical work that had to happen. So it was pretty challenging, and also, but good challenging in a kind of rewarding and fun way.
Yeah, people will see all the physical work you had to do in this one. How long did it take you to master some of that? Because without giving anything away, folks will really see you go to a whole different level here in terms of using your body to tell a story and to tell a story about other people in the room as well.
Yeah, it was very challenging. I mean, this was, it wasn't like I was doing stuff with another person in a green suit that then got photoshopped out afterwards. That wasn't the conceit of how we were doing it. So a lot of it felt more like a sort of solo modern dance kind of experiment. And I also had to do some wire work, which was pretty nothing I'd ever done before. I enjoyed it a lot.
That's really awesome. So people will see that Beth is going through a lot in her life. She just lost her husband. She learns a lot about him that she didn't know. What was it like just unpacking that concept of you think you know this person and then you really don't know this person?
I mean, that's really the sort of hinge point of the story and the character. I thought there was something really compelling about the idea of someone who is grieving, whose husband has taken their life unexpectedly, in the sort of sense that you are left with, I didn't know anything about that person, just on that level. And then taking that sort of idea to a psychological extreme of like, well, if I didn't know he was capable of that, then I can imagine that he was capable of anything, that he could have been a monster. So it's a sort of weird grief rabbit hole that she goes down. So there's a sort of psychological component as well as a potentially supernatural one.
And it's also this question of, do you actually want to know this stuff or do you just want to compartmentalize and move on, right? I think that's kind of the big question as well as you look along through this movie.
I mean, the question is that, how well do you ever know anyone, really?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And then especially too, if you realize that that person that you think you know is involved with other people, but in a different kind of way too, it really throws things out for a loop there.
Yeah, and then you get into some extreme territory, exactly.
One of the things that's really apparent in the film, and you mentioned it, was just it's you and the house. There's not many people in the movie, and the silence really drums through in this entire film. So what was it like just seeing that as kind of like a big storyline and even like a character in and of itself, just the silence in the house itself?
I got to know that house really well. I mean, for a lot of the time it was a house and I think the art department on this film were extraordinary and did an extraordinary job making it look like a normal house. And then later on in the movie, we had to sort of stretch reality a little bit. And so essentially they recreated the house that we'd been on for 2 or 3 weeks or whatever on a soundstage, but everything was slightly different, but basically the same, which was incredibly disorienting for me, because I'd got so used to acting in this house and the couch being in a certain place and the, whatever it was, the bookshelf being in a certain place. And then we went onto the soundstage and everything was flipped. So it was reversed and slightly wider. And it was very destabilizing and interesting.
One of the other things you mentioned was how we all deal with grief, right? And so your character, Beth, she has the way that she publicly deals with it, the way that she privately deals with it. What were some thoughts you had about that? Because I would imagine, some films and projects you've done, you're able to do it, you go home, you're not thinking about it anymore. This one kind of feels like it stays in your head a little bit longer. So how did you think about grief and trauma after playing this part?
I mean, a lot of the work that I've done, I have to sort of think about these things. And I think I've got to a point in my career where I've learned that it's not very healthy for one's life to take it home. So I work pretty hard to be as committed as I can for the hours that I'm on set and then leave it there and go home. Luckily, my daughter was only, I think, about 8 months old when I was shooting this. So when I went home, I didn't have much of a choice to think about, turn everything else off and think about her, which was very helpful, honestly, because you can go down a little sort of, the wrong kind of rabbit holes.
Yeah, it's always good when your daughter can bring you back to square one and just realize what reality is and what you got to focus on at this point, right? That's super important.
Yeah.
So
really important.
Yeah, no doubt. So another thing for you is that you've done all these different projects in the past. What surprised you the most about this? Because you mentioned some stuff that you hadn't done before physically, you were challenged in different ways. What didn't you really anticipate going into it that ended up happening?
I suppose I didn't anticipate how, I mean, I did conceptually anticipate how hard it is to keep energized when you don't have other actors around. But it's a funny thing that I think not a lot of people realize about acting, is that we do really take a lot from each other. Like there's this sort of old adage that you're really only as good as the person that you're on screen with. So, because you derive a lot of energy from reacting to someone. So I think the thing that really surprised me about doing something that was not always on my own, but a lot on my own, was that it was very difficult to just maintain the stamina. It was like, because occasionally I'd just be like, is there anyone else that they can throw the camera on right now? Can I just take a breather? And you just miss out on a certain amount of, energy that you just get from the other person that you're working with.
And especially after doing
jokes between takes.
Yeah, I mean, come on, think about all the different takes you must have done for some of those scenes at the end, which people will see. Like, it would have been nice to have somebody else there to kind of pick you up a little bit, but that's just all you. You just had to roll with it there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but nice problems to have.
Exactly. Well, another nice problem to have is when you have multiple projects that have been doing well for you. I mean, this is a really cool time for you because you have this film, Godzilla versus Kong was one of the biggest ones of the pandemic, passing as a director. What's it like for you to see all these different projects resonating with different pockets of people?
It is really exciting. It's also a little bit overwhelming, honestly, because we're coming out of this time where we've all been quite, isolated, and I haven't done a lot of this sort of front-facing work. I've just been sort of quietly doing all this work for a long time. I shot these films 2 years ago almost, and Passing was a year ago, and then I was editing throughout the pandemic. So I've just been sort of working, and now there's this sort of odd and fortuitous moment where they're all coming out at the same time. I'm not entirely used to that. It feels very, I'm not entirely used to talking to people. So, it feels like I'm going to have to do a lot more getting used to it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good problem to have as well, right?
Very good problem to have, yeah.
How surprising was the Godzilla versus Kong thing? Because like you mentioned, it was the pandemic, like people hadn't really been going to the theater, then boom, this becomes a big hit in theaters and HBO Max too.
It was quite surprising. I think we'd all got to a point where we didn't really have any expectations about how movies were going to, perform during that moment, because people weren't going to the cinema. And I think we just hit a moment when it was possible for people to go to the cinema again. And actually we hit some sort of nerve where it was clear that actually the thing that people really wanted to see were two enormous monsters hitting each other in the face. So,
Go figure, right? I think movies will always have a really important place in our culture, whether it's watching them at home, watching them in the theater. Another thing I think about with you is just film festivals, right? Like the Sundance Film Festival was huge for you in a couple of different ways with this film, with Passing. I mean, can you just explain what it's done for you in your career and the impact it's had?
Sundance has probably been the most influential festival personally for my career. Just because so many films that I cherish and love have played there, have had their moment there, have sold there. including the film that I did first one. So it has a very, very particular and special place in my heart, and always will.
When you think about this time in your life, and one day when you're telling your daughter that you were editing Passing and doing all these movies, what should she know about this phase of your life and this chapter of your career?
I don't know. I'll probably just point to a picture. There's one photograph which will never go public, but I can describe it.
Sure.
Of me. It was when we were shooting The Night House, and it was on a weekend, so it was my day off. But I also knew that I was about to go into production for Passing, and I just wrapped on Tales from the Loop. So I was sort of juggling many, many different things. And there's a photograph of me with my daughter, and I'm still nursing her. And I'm also drawing my storyboards for Passing, and the script for The Night House is off to the side. And I think it just says everything.
It perfectly encapsulates you. Wow, that's an incredible one. Yeah, you'll hold on to that one for private. Yeah. We have enough of you in public already. We got the movies, we got everything.
That one's for us, but I can talk about it.
Well, Rebecca, really nice to talk to you again. You were unbelievable in this film. Congratulations, and look forward to watching a lot of your stuff going forward, all right?
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Rebecca. Good to talk to you again.
Bye.